Services Committee. For Tuesday, August the 6th, 2019. Our first resolution is 2019-1847. Sponsors Gilmore. It approves an amendment, one, to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metro Board of Health to provide HIV, STD, viral hepatitis prevention, surveillance, and PrEP clinic services. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And then, actually, we're going to pause. I made a little bit of an error. I think I got discombobulated after going to chase Councilmember Van Reese. We said we were going to take the, yeah, that's okay. We're going to pull that back. And we're going to actually take up her legislation only because she has somewhere else to go. So we want to do that, and she sent me something early today, so please forgive me. So let's start with Resolution 2019-1868, sponsors Van Reese and Wiener. Condemns animal abuse in any form, including the soring and mistreatment of horses, and recognizing the federal regulatory safeguards in place to protect horses. Now may I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded.
Thank you for taking it out of order. I have constituents that are being confirmed tonight on boards and commissions, and I want to make sure and welcome them downstairs. So thank you for that accommodation. We all know there's been a lot of discussion concerning the resolutions and the ordinances in regard to this topic. I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that there was a late filed amendment to this resolution that adds the following section to go on record as supporting the passage of additional federal legislation to ensure that all horses are free from soring and abuse, and to send a copy of the resolution to each member of the Tennessee delegation to the United States Senate. So it goes a little bit further in addressing some of Councilmember Murphy's concerns in her subsequent amendment. So I wanted to make sure that I was available to be available to talk about that if you wanted to talk about it, but also to make sure that this committee knew that I've done best efforts to make sure that we have a resolution that has the overarching concern, which is the protection of our horses, particularly in Davidson County. But it goes even further in making sure that if there is federal legislation to further that protection, that we would support that. So that's where I am with this. It is an alternative to the ordinance, but it also runs separate from the ordinance. So I don't think that there's any reason in the world why we wouldn't want to pass this resolution and continue the discussion of Ms. Murphy's ordinance. It's not an either or, it's just a companion. And I think that's I'll stop talking. That's where I am.
Okay. Are there any questions?
I don't necessarily have a question, but because I did get so many, which I'm sure all of you as well, received so much feedback about this, I went out and sought some people and found out that there is federal regulation that's already in place in regards to this. So, being that your ordinance encompasses those federal regulations, I'm wondering if it is necessary to do it, since they supersede anything that we do anyway.
I'm happy to speak when you want me to, Chair.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Council Lady Murphy.
So what I've got, I think I've got enough copies. If y'all are not aware, I think there's been a serious plug for a new copy machine in the council office. This is a summary of research I've done, cited, and copies of the research behind it. We're stuck together. I'll let you take them apart. So if you look at the second page that's in color, that might be the easiest and fastest one because I know we're all on a limited time schedule. So yes, currently there is federal regulation passed many, many years ago saying that soring is not a good practice and should be banned. But while congressional intention was to ban soring, they regulated or gave the power of making the rules over to the USDA. So as of 2016, 2017, end of 2017, there was a rule that actually would ban the devices that are listed in my substitute that y'all will see that's in the amendment packet, and that was in my original bill. So right now, there's federal legislation around soaring, but there are still action devices that allow soaring to take place. And so some of those devices are what you see in front of you today. There's also the fact that the USDA does not have the funding or the amount of inspectors to go to every type of horse show, auction, or exhibition that we're talking here. And so they have regulated that to having, you can outsource it basically. And so horse shows can hire their own inspectors. So if you look at the sheet that's printed in color, middle column, bottom, second section, I think that probably explains it very succinctly about how it's almost like the fox is watching the hen house in some of these situations. And so what I think is important here is I appreciate that Council Lady Van Rees is trying to still make a statement about soaring, about us caring for horses, but her original resolution is a little bit more of a thoughts and prayers type of thing. We acknowledge we like horses, we acknowledge there's some federal regulation. What my legislation does and what my amendment to her resolution does is it takes a step further and it says not only do we care about horses, we're going to make sure they're protected in Davidson County and that we encourage our senators to vote in favor to banning devices like this from being continued to use. That congressional action passed in the House overwhelmingly bipartisan, and I think that might be the last attachment on here. You can see the vote and all of the sponsors. I believe it's over 300 House sponsors, over 40 Senate sponsors, and so it's going to go to the Senate next. But traditionally, over the past several years, when this legislation has passed in the House, it gets stonewalled in the Senate. So when that happens, like that happens on a lot of legislation we care about at the federal level, we can take action here locally. And that action is to put an amendment on Council Lady Van Rees's resolution saying that we want our senators to support the PAST Act that has already passed the House. And then the second thing is this committee has already passed through its support on my original legislation, but I have that second substitute that is a compromise with some of the pieces that the horse show and horse walking, Tennessee walking horse industry came to me with concerns. Weighted shoes, that's hard to define. I've taken that out. Making sure it's clear that these are only public events. That was something that was a concern of the industry and of health. And so you'll see on your desk tonight that there's a letter from the health department saying that they do not have further concerns with my second substitute. You'll have a letter there further confirming this does not apply to horses. And so coming back to this piece of legislation, what is important is that if you choose to amend Council Lady Van Rees's original resolution with my amendment, it sends a clear message to our states and to our federal legislators that we want them to support the PAST Act. It is already passed in the House, and hopefully it does not continue to get stonewalled in the Senate. If it gets stonewalled there, then we need to act locally so our horses are not being shown with these on them. But, if the Senate had taken action, that would be great. If Trump hadn't squashed Obama's rules that were coming in at the end of that term, I wouldn't have this legislation in front of us and we wouldn't be having this discussion. So, happy to take questions.
I'd like to hear from the other side.
Yes.
Okay. There's somebody here that can represent the other side.
I want to take Councilmember Hastings too because he had raised his hand, but he had spoken. So
I just wanted to ask really quickly, what is the replacement of the chains, how do you keep that inside to where they are? I know the shoes are there for a reason, right? What are the replacements? What are we doing?
So you can still show horses without using pads and chains and these action devices that are in my legislation and that are in the past, that will be banned in the PAST Act at the federal level. You can train, you could show without them. My legislation does not discuss training, so you could still train your horses with these devices on them. But my legislation says you cannot show them with those on there. And from all accounts and everything I've seen, you don't have to have chains, pads, nails, and other action devices on these horses to still get that big kick up, that big lick gait. So.
I'm still trying to understand.
Oh, Council Lady, we want to do it in the order, because she said, and then she
I'm
asked,
sorry.
what's the, okay, yes, thank you, I appreciate it. Okay, so if we had someone, we're going to time it too, we're going to give you 2 minutes. If someone is from the opposite side,
I'll just kick it off, and then I've got the experts, but I would say that
and say your name, please.
I'm Baylor Swindle.
And who are you representing?
Representing FAST, the walking horse breeders and trainers. And I would say that, as you've heard, this is really a federal issue. And we would debate the fact that this is compromise language. But if you want to know more about how the industry works, these guys are here. But this isn't really an issue in Davidson County. But they want to use this, I think, on the federal level to help with their legislation there. And we just don't agree in doing it that way, I guess. But these guys can speak more to like the nuts and bolts of the equipment used.
Yeah.
So,
I would just say,
let me ask a question. Are you telling me that those things are used today and they're legal?
so no, the equipment is regulated by federal law. The chain on a horse's foot cannot weigh more than 6 ounces. So no, that is not legal on the left. So
That would be legal.
that would be
This one is.
that would be legal.
It's legal
The
to
other is
train
to
in that.
train.
It's legal to show in
1
this.
second.
Is
Let's
it-
in order.
Is it legal to train in the bigger one?
No,
It's not.
no, but the federal law, the Federal Horse Protection Act doesn't apply to training in the barn. It's at the show. It's a commerce law. It's actually, so it's a little bit different. So, but where they are shown, they can have a 6-ounce action device on, which, something that she's not telling you, many other breeds that she's not including do utilize pads and action devices when they show. Secondly is both of Tennessee's senators and 6 of their 9 representatives voted against the PAST Act are definitely not in support of it. They have a different piece of legislation, which is why Ms. Van Reese's amendment says whichever legislation comes forward to alleviate this, Nashville will support it. So it's not bipartisan in the areas that have Tennessee walking horses. If you look at Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky, 70% of the representatives in Congress voted against it. So it's not in areas where there are Tennessee walking horses. It's not a bipartisan or even supported piece of legislation at all. There's a different piece of legislation in the House of Representatives that is from the horse industry. So it's unclear which of those would come forward, which is why a resolution is saying, hey, anything that the federal regulators or that Congress does, that Nashville would support it. But also the equipment used by Tennessee walking horses has been studied multiple times by universities, and none of it has ever been proven to harm a horse at all, ever. And so those are readily available, and I don't know why anyone would say that the equipment causes soring. The equipment is not. If the equipment caused soring, they wouldn't allow it in any breed. So it's not the equipment. If somebody's doing something, it's a person doing it, not the equipment. So the legal equipment.
So I guess part of my angst is, and I'm the biggest animal advocate that there is, my biggest angst is with all the things that we have on our plate here in Nashville. I'm not sure we need to wade in to what's going on at the federal level and let the feds make the decision. I didn't know about the amendments, and I fully support them because we need to support the legislation to make sure these animals are protected. And quite frankly, I'd rather it be a blanket statement of all horses and not just specific breeds, because I think there's got to be protection for all of our animals instead of just a few. So that's where my angst is about the whole issue and about what we as a council took an oath to do, and that's to protect the interests of Davidson County residents. And this clearly doesn't take place in Davidson County, and so that's where I'm really struggling with it.
Okay. And then Councilmember Pulley whispered, I would like to speak next. Go ahead, yes.
Just a simple question. I think she made a statement, but I want to ask, it doesn't matter which side or both can answer this, how much of this do we have in Davidson County? I mean, how many walking horses, how many shows, how much training, or any of that stuff that we have here in this county?
There are no shows in Davidson County.
There have been shows, and there can be more shows. These horses are frequently guests at the state fair, and just because there wasn't a show in the last 6 months doesn't mean there's not going to be a show in the next 6 months. And I will touch on the fact that when I did receive the emails saying, why are you selecting these three horses, these three breeds of horses, that is because those are the three that are most commonly found having been soared. And I said to the industry when they have, through various people, talked to me, I said, if you want me to include other horses, send me a list of horses. And the resounding response was, oh, no, we don't want to open that Pandora's box. And really, this is a local issue. I mean, this is very similar to when we banned puppy mills. We said that we don't want puppy mill puppies and kitty mill kitties sold in Davidson County. I don't think that I want to take or know that there are horses being shown with this here in Davidson County.
I think I am, and I'm finished with my question. That's just a brief statement. Is I'm a little concerned that we're picking somebody else's fight here. I appreciate very much what Council Lady Murphy is intending to do here. I don't think anybody is really concerned about, or is not concerned about animals being mistreated, and we are as well. I just have a concern about us.
Okay, thank you.
Get involved in this. I'm going to support the resolution and the amendments.
Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I represent the district that has the state fair, right, that has the fairgrounds in it, and we're a week and a half away from opening the brand new expo facilities that are gigantic and great and wonderful. And I think there is an anticipation that there will be more shows and more agricultural shows, not only in the state fair, because I think they're trying to move to more of an agricultural focus, but also because we've just created new facilities that are, quite frankly, perfect for these kinds of shows. And I would want to know that if that's coming in to the district I represent, that we're not permitting this kind of action. And I will point out, I think I mentioned this on the second reading, when we have to deal with puppy mill raids and other animal abuse issues, they come to the fairgrounds. They come to the fairgrounds for the animals to be cared for them to be distributed to shelters. So this area that I represent is kind of known for kind of being a safe haven for animals that have been abused, and I would not want to go back on that reputation. I want to further enhance that reputation.
So, Councilmember, are you referring to the resolution right now? Because that's what we're talking about. Are you talking about that?
Yes, because I've become concerned about the resolution becoming a substitute, a de facto substitute for the legislation that's being discussed on third reading tonight.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Hurt.
So my concern too is that we're fighting someone else's fight, and Councilwoman Van Reese's amendment or her ordinance seems to me covers pretty much what it is that need to be done. But also, I'm wondering, are we punishing everybody for something that just a select group of people are doing? I don't want to be responsible for making a difficult or a decision about a blanket decision when it's not affecting everyone. And those unintended circumstances and consequences occur all the time when we make these kinds of decisions. So again, I don't know why, because when I spoke specifically this morning at 5 o'clock at the Bellevue Y to someone, and their question to me is, why is the Metro Council dealing with this when there are federal regulations? And this is a trusted person who deals with horses all the time, and he does not allow soaring, and it's unethical and all of those things, but he did not see it as a reason for us to be dealing with it, and that's why I keep asking the same question.
If I can just briefly respond, you're right, and I applaud that a lot of people do not soar their horses. A lot of people do recognize that you can get a big gate and you can do a big leg horse and you can win championships without your horse being soared. But there are still people who soar their animals, and there are people who train with action devices like these that can lead to harming the animal. And so again, yes, there are federal regulations, but they do not go far enough to prevent soaring. If they did, if there was federal regulations that covered this, then the House of Representatives would not have just passed another piece of legislation banning the same devices that we're talking about, and there would not be horses found soared today.
So would the issue be about enforcement and not necessarily about what you're saying? And I'm just thinking about that with some of the other things that we've had where people are not guilty of doing things that we've seen happen in short-term rental properties, but it's more about the enforcement of it. So I'm just asking a question. I don't know, and I'm really trying to understand, being that I have to make a decision.
No, I understand. I have another stack of papers about that big, so I'm trying to water it down.
I'm not going to read all of that.
Exactly. So really what it comes down to is, do we, as Davidson County elected officials, want to allow horses to be shown in Davidson County, exhibited in Davidson County, sold in auctions in Davidson County, with these devices that more often than not
that sounds like a guilt trip. Like you put me on a guilt trip to say, if you don't vote this way, then you are allowing this to happen. And I don't want to bear that responsibility.
That is not my intention at all. I'm just saying that right now, these devices that I'm showing you and the ones listed in my legislation and listed in the PAST Act, which is my amendment to Council Lady Van Reese's legislation, is banning these from being used. And so if they're banned, then we're not going to have soaring instances happen. People are not going to be getting caught because they're not using, we're further taking them away. But again, they can still show, there are plenty of horses shown now that are not soaring and are not in use of these action devices.
So how could that be guaranteed that will not happen?
So the federal regulators, USDA, they either have a USDA inspector on site that inspects the horse going into the ring, coming out of the ring, but it's like the fox watch in the hen house sometimes, because that has been outsourced. A lot of times these shows can hire their own private inspectors. So if you go back to the second handout, bottom page, that's where it's talked about a little bit more about how, and there are studies shown that, which is the study, what's the name of it? That shows that 9 times out of 10, when you've got the private, 9 times, I might have the wrong ratio before I get screamed at, that you are more likely to get away with hurting your animal when there are private companies doing the inspecting.
That's completely
So if the federal regulations are not necessarily being enforced, then how can we ensure that local regulations will be enforced?
By saying you can't use these.
But the federal regulations said we can't use them.
No, federally, you can use these right now. We're going to say you can't in Davidson County.
Question? What about? Hold on 1 second. Okay. So how it usually works is the committee goes and we recognize the committee. And then if it's at the pleasure of the chair, we recognize others in the audience. Okay. So we just want to make sure that it doesn't turn into a conversation, that we're keeping the committee format. Thank you. Okay, so Councilmember Porterfield. My question is similar to Councilwoman Hurt's question. How can we ensure that this is being regulated? And then also, what is the fiscal impact of passing either your legislation or Councilwoman Van Reese's legislation?
So the fiscal impact on mine is on my ordinance, there is none. I've met with the Department of Health, and there's a letter on your desk stating that, because I didn't want to bring in that ordinance handouts in here too. Council Lady Van Reese's resolution would just be the postage to our state senators, or our federal senators, because all that is a moralizing resolution. It just says we like horses, and there's federal law. Just like we like children, and there's laws against child abuse, but it still happens, right? So there's other things that we do locally to further prevent child abuse. I think we probably have some grants before y'all tonight on that and things like that. So really, at the end of the day, the original Van Reese resolution before you, I have an amendment to that saying that we support what over 300 Congresspeople have supported and passed through the House just recently. And we are telling our U.S. senators that we would like them to support that in the Senate as well, because it's time that we take action on this. These were devices that would have been banned per the USDA rule that was going to be published, but 5 days before it was published, President Trump took office and sent a memo sending all rules back to where they came from to be reviewed, so regardless of department. So if that rule had gone into effect as it went through all of the channels of the hearing processes and things like that, my legislation wouldn't be needed, federal legislation wouldn't be needed. But because the federal level has failed to act on this, and because we can act on this locally, we should. And I hope that you do.
Okay, so we're going to entertain some brief comments. Oh, you have another question?
Just one other
Yes.
brief statement is.
Yes, sure. Go
Sure.
ahead, Councilmember.
So to that point, then I think it's good that we pass this resolution and let the federal government do their work. They have this bill before that's already passed the House, and it's pending legislation at the federal level. So I would support letting that run its course myself.
And then we're going to recognize what we're going to do, because in about 15 minutes, we're going to have a 5:30 committee meeting. I know we have a lot, so we want to honor that. I'm just going to give 2 minutes if the other side, and then we're going to move forward to take a vote, only because I feel ourselves not being able to finish before the other committee comes in. So if someone on the opposite side that shares the opposite position would like to speak.
I would say one thing to understand too is under current federal regulations, every single walking horse is inspected prior to showing. So, and all of the horses that win are inspected post-show. And so the fox guarding the hen house argument is not exactly true, because all of those organizations are certified and licensed by the USDA and go in through training. Those inspectors go through training with the USDA, and the USDA is at a large percentage of the shows. We'll be at the World Championship show in a couple of weeks. So the federal regulators are there. They are looking at the horses. There are veterinarians looking at every single horse prior to him being shown. So to say that it's the fox guard and the hen house, and the leading HIO in the state of Tennessee said something like 90% more likely to soar them when that's not true. There's about a 1% difference between their detection rate and the federal USDA people. So it's actually already regulated, in every single horse, no matter what county it's shown in, has to be inspected prior to being shown, and then all winners are inspected post-show to make sure there's no sewing going on. So just wanted to make that point.
Okay, thank you. I thank you so much for being here. And we also want to thank Council Lady Murphy for bringing this through and bringing plenty of information. At this time, we're going to take a vote, not because we don't respect the dialogue, but only because there are a couple more committees, and we're at the end of our council term, and we do want to make sure that we are mindful of the time. Councilmember Van Reese, do you have anything else to add?
No, I would just like to move the resolution as...
You gotta move the amendment.
Oh, sorry, move the amendment, the late filed amendment first.
We have 2 amendments to move, don't we?
So, yeah, there's the late file amendment and the proposed amendment. So let's move the late file amendment
Okay.
first.
The late filed amendment to 1868.
Second.
Actually got them move the First Amendment and then move the late filed amendment.
Okay, or you can do them together.
I don't care.
think it's
I
what
don't
you said.
care.
Yeah. So you can take the amendment and the late file amendment together.
Okay.
Sometimes we can just combine them together.
Well, let's
You
do
can-
that because this is an alteration of that. So let's take Councilmember Murphy's amendment to Resolution 1868, and I will make that motion.
Okay, so moved and it's properly seconded. How many in favor? Okay.
Okay? And now I move my late filed amendment to the Resolution 1868.
Okay, so moved properly second. How many in favor? All right, seeing none against, it has been accepted, and we will put it before the full body. Seeing none against. Thank you so much. All right, so that concludes the discussion, and it's...
Accept the bill as amended.
Okay, yes, we do need to...
Oh,
say-
the resolution
Yes,
as amended.
Okay, yes, we do need to do that part.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm a
so,
little discombobulated.
yeah, that's okay.
I move the resolution as amended.
All right.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. How many? All right, so the bill has been amended, and help me out. The bill has been amended and has been the resolution has been amended and has been accepted as amended, and so we'll take it before the full body. Seeing none against. Thank you so much. All right.
And Madam Chair, I didn't want to pause anything, but I just wanted to note that Ms. Emily Harris was in the audience. And wanted to
Oh,
welcome
yeah,
her.
we do want.
Welcome
Yes,
to
we
our
do want to
proceedings.
recognize when we always have celebrities amongst us. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much. We appreciate you and your work. Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Okay, so we're going to carry on with the next resolution, which is 2019-1847. Thank each of you for coming for that particular resolution. It approves Amendment 1 to grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metro Board of Health to provide HIV, STD, viral hepatitis prevention, surveillance, and PrEP clinic services. All in favor?
Aye.
See, I'm all turned around here. Okay. You know what? Do we have discussion on this? We need to, okay, I'm a little discombobulated. Please forgive me. So we need to move it, and now that we've moved it, is there discussion?
It doesn't do much. There's a few minor tweaks to the language that make the nomenclature consistent with the PDH one. It doesn't change the money or really doesn't change the payment.
Okay, now are there any more discussion on it?
I need to be
You need to abstain
abstained from the vote.
Okay, got you. So now we're ready to take a vote if there's no more discussion on it. All in favor? Aye. Okay, seeing none against, it is recommended to the full body for approval. Okay, we'll just discombobulated there. Please forgive me. Okay. Resolution 2019-1848 approves the contract, sponsors Virtue and Gilmore, approves the contract for services by and between the Metro Board of Health and Neighborhood Health to provide homeless individuals with medical services at 2 or more clinics in or near downtown Nashville. May I have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion?
So the charter requires us, the health department, to provide medical care for the homeless. And we used to run the clinic down here close to the Mission. And that morph evolved over time. I'm not sure it was before I got there, to this grant between the health department and what is now Neighborhood Health, which is, Neighborhood Health. And it helps them to maintain that clinic. It wouldn't be enough to run it, but it does help maintain that clinic.
So they're still running the services?
Yeah, and it used to be that all we required was that they see a certain number of people, which is a pretty low standard. The contract now has a lot more specifics of what we expect in terms of the care that's delivered.
Okay, is there any more discussion? All right, well, we're ready to take a vote. How many in favor? Seeing none against, it's recommended to the full body for approval. Resolution 2019-1849 sponsors Virtue, approves a grant contract between the Metro Board of Health and the Mental Health Cooperative to provide a secure drop-off location for persons needing a mental health urgent care alternative to an emergency room or correctional facility to serve as a viable and expedient source of emergency psychiatric care. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion?
So this grew out of one of the public improvement plans, public PIPs, a couple years ago, where it was widely recognized in the community that a lot of people whose only problem basically was they were in some sort of mental health crisis, but the only place that we had to put them, the community had to put them was in jail. And nobody thought that was a particularly good idea. And so this helps fund the expansion of the mental health co-op's crisis receiving operation. They've added a bunch of beds and staff, and that's
Good stuff.
I'd like to say something about this. I have dealt with this firsthand with a particular patient of mine that had some recurrent crises that would come up. And the most frustrating thing was when my practice partner and I would get this phone call, and we would have nowhere to take him to other than our homes with care. And so to keep him out of jail, because that would have been a death sentence. And so I am tickled to see this come through.
And I too do it too, because it also is very expensive for them to go to the emergency room as opposed to that. So it costs Nashville General quite a bit to support and provide the services for these individuals. And I was able to tour the new facilities that they built out with Mental Health Co-op, and it's great. So I too think this is a wonderful thing.
Ladies, why aren't you laughing if you're tickled?
All right, how many for? None against is recommended for approval. Okay. Who else wants to finish here?
Okay, so Resolution 2019-1850 sponsors Virtue and Gilmore accepts a grant from the Tennessee Department of Human Services to the Metro Board of Health to conduct immunization record audits for child care centers, drop-in centers, and group child care homes to ensure the safety and well-being of children and families in Tennessee. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion?
The DHS licenses the daycare centers, and one of their requirements to keep that license is that the children in the daycare centers be properly immunized. We audit on their behalf the immunization records. You asked yesterday, Madam Chairman, if we went. We used to. We don't anymore. There's over 200 of these centers, and you may have noticed the traffic has gotten a little snarled up. So she has them send the paperwork to her, and she audits them at her desk.
Okay.
They can lose their license if they fail to audit.
And is it only one auditor?
It's a half of an auditor, basically.
And
It's
then
a half
that
of
sent
it.
to the state.
It's
That report's then sent to the
$28,000. She has other things to do.
Oh, got you. So half her time's dedicated to this and half to something else. And how many daycares you said it was?
There's over 200 of them.
Okay.
That would be a little time consuming.
Yeah.
You think?
You can imagine trying to drive.
Especially with a half an auditor too. I just wonder, we need to look at that more, maybe in the future.
Yes.
I just wonder how,
She gets through they're annual, and she gets through all of them every year. So
I bet she does get through.
she gets,
Okay. All right. Is there any more discussion? All right. Seeing, we're gonna take a vote? Okay, how many in favor?
He's ready to vote.
Seeing none against, it's recommended to the full body for approval.
Jump the gun.
You did. You're trying to tell me something. Okay.
Got two more, don't we?
And we're doing good. We have come on, we'll make it in time. Okay, we have two more. Resolution 2019-1851 sponsors Virtue and Gilmore. It accepts a grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metro Board of Health to provide an array of programs and direct patient care services to meet the public health needs of Tennessee's citizens. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved and properly seconded. Discussion.
this is the state's grant and aid grant. $725,000 has been that for a decade or more. It is stringless money. It's a pot of money that they give us to use as we need it. We tend to use it in bits and pieces here and there to fill in the gaps. If we prevent people from getting laid off, if we can pay the remainder of their salary, if their grant ends, we'll try to keep them on until we can find another fund source. It's just a really useful pot of money.
Is there any more discussion or questions? Councilmember Pulley keeps on saying something, but I can't quite hear what he's saying over here.
Whispering to you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Seeing none against, none not voting, it's recommended to the full body for approval. And we have one more, and I do want to thank everyone for being here. Today we have a full committee. Resolution 2019-1867. Councilmember Murphy welcomes the 2019 Redmond Health and Safety Symposium and Barbara EMS Conference to Nashville. Have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? She does have a letter asking for approval.
It's about firefighters and EMS workers coming to Nashville. Welcome.
Bring them.
Okay, well, sounds good. So how many for?
Bring it.
Seeing none against none, our vote is recommended to the full body for approval. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. That's it.
We did it. This concludes our committee meeting.